Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone out to the Northeast Region Regional Advisory Council meeting for December 8th, 2022. I'm Brett Prevedel. I'm the current chair of this board, and I'll take a moment to let the other RAC members introduce themselves. Mallory, would you start, please?
Mallory Harrison, Agriculture.
Bob Christensen, Forest Service, filling in for Natasha Haddon.
Rebecca Jones, and I represent non-consumptive users.
Brad Horricks, representing the elected officials.
We have two members online currently. Joe, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, yes, Joe Arnold, representing the public.
And Eric, are you online, or we can introduce you when you get here?
Yep, Eric Major representing the public.
Thank you. I'd also like to welcome the DWR staff, and I see we have Randy Durst from the Wildlife Board. Welcome tonight. And also, I failed to have Miles introduce himself.
Yes, I'm Miles Hanberg. I'm the Regional Supervisor for the Division of Wildlife Resources in the Northeast region.
Thank you. With that, we'll delve into the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to look at the agenda? If so, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda for this evening's meeting.
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda.
Motion by Mallory,
Second.
seconded by Brad. All in favor? And we'll do roll call online. Joe?
Call online.
Joe?
Yes.
Eric? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to last meeting's minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review them? And if so, I'll entertain any edits or a motion to approve them.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting, as long as there's no corrections or updates.
I'll second the motion.
Motion by Brad, second by Rebecca. All in favor?
Aye.
Joe?
Yes.
Eric?
Aye.
Is that a yes? Okay, thank you. We'll move to item number 3 on the agenda, which is the Wildlife Board meeting update. I guess I would describe the Wildlife Board meeting as interesting, for lack of a better description. If you remember, it was primarily dealing with the 10-year elk plan. So I'll just go through the motions. Can I just borrow that, Miles? That were passed by the Wildlife Board, and then we can have questions if it's unclear by the RAC. We'd sent in a couple suggestions on changes of edits. One with the agricultural issue of the brucellosis comment in there, and the other one was the lack of the government agencies being listed in one of the sections. And the Wildlife Board moved that they fix both of them as we suggested, just as minor edits. They made a motion that the plan be reviewed in 3-year intervals instead of, was it set up to be 5, I believe? So a little quicker so that we can see whether it's working as planned. And this is where if you remember, the elk plan came from a committee of 19, and it navigated through the RAC process with the 5 regional advisory councils relatively intact, and it did not go through the Wildlife Board relatively intact. So there's some fairly major changes. And the first one was they approved that they leave the recommendation was to changed the archery permits to you buy a bull tag, you buy a cow tag. They could have 2 tags, but you had to designate the sex you're hunting. The Wildlife Board did not approve that, and they changed that back to the way it is the way it has been, which is an either sex single tag for the archery elk. Then they made a motion that passed to eliminate all the multi-season tags for the any bull units. The spike multi-season tags will remain in existence. They made an adjustment on the Ponsagot unit. Well, there was a motion to remove the Ponsagot unit from the transition to open bull. That did not pass, but then they did make a motion that they remove the archery portion of the Ponsagot unit, and that did pass. So it'll only have rifle and muzzleloader. The reason for that was the conflict with some premium deer hunts. Then there was a motion that almost passed. It was a 3-3 vote, and then the tie was broken by the chairman to impose an antler restriction of 4-point or better on all any bull units, and that did not pass with the vote from the chairman. The remainder of the elk plan was passed as presented. The season dates, there was no changes from what was presented. If you remember, we'd made a recommendation to eliminate the overlapping hunts with the 5-day period in September. That was not approved by the board, so that's still in existence. The emergency technology proposal was tabled, which was consistent with our recommendation, and it'll come back later with the bigger package of technology recommendations. The CWMU recommendations were approved, and the waiver was approved on the Sweetwater unit, which was what we had recommended also. And that, I believe, was about it for the business. There was some other, permit allocations that were approved as presented, and there was a variance that we didn't see on a bison permit that was approved. I believe that's it. Is there questions from the RAC? Okay, with that, I'll turn the time over for item number 4 to Miles for the regional update.
All right. In the Northeast region, it continues to be really busy. Things haven't really slowed down much yet. And I don't know, it doesn't really slow down at any time anymore, but I thought I'd take a few minutes and just give some updates from some of our sections and what's going on through the highlights right now. So the next slide. So deer classification has been going pretty well. We're getting close to wrap that up for the year. We seem to be seeing a lot of fawns this year, which is good. And a lot of those fawns are really healthy and in good shape. They're big, looking good. And some of the research is really showing the bigger and heavier they come into the winter, the more likelihood they have of surviving. The does look good as well. As the does have higher fat reserves coming into the winter, it affects their survival as well as the subsequent fawn survival the next year. So some good news on that. We're hoping that the winter will cooperate with deer. We don't lose too many, but it looks like we'll have some opportunity for some growth on the deer herds, hopefully. So capture work has been going on the south slope. We finished that up. We've been catching deer, mainly does and fawns. This is part of a a statewide survival monitoring project. This monitoring allows us to get real close numbers on our survival rates for not only does but also fawns, and it really helps with our population modeling as well as our permit recommendation process to where we can dial those numbers in a lot closer. So we were able to catch 4 mountain goats on the south slope to add some additional mountain goat collars. We were hoping to get a few more, and we may be able to try that a little bit later this year, but that's just part of a project where we're trying to get a better idea of what limiting factors are on mountain goats and UNAs and what the survival rates will be for mountain goats. So this next bullet talks about continuing next week. We need to catch more deer on the north slope, the Book Cliffs and Anthro and Wasatch units as part of a migration initiative work. However, this work has now been postponed for a while. I don't know if anybody saw maybe on the news today, but one of the capture companies, their ship went down today on the LaSalle Mountains. We're happy to report that none of the capture crew was injured, and they're all doing well tonight. So we're really grateful that they're okay, and it's going to probably slow down some of our capture work. But again, for the RAC members, as we ramp back up to start capturing again in the region, you're welcome to come out and participate on that and see the things that we're doing. So right now that schedule's a little bit up in the air as far as what's going on. We're still monitoring chronic wasting disease in the region. This year we've had 13 positive samples, mainly from the Mighton area, but also from some from Diamond Mountain. And these are the same areas where we've had chronic wasting disease positive deer in the past, and so that's not a big surprise. But we do see a couple up around the Roosevelt area, and we're really trying to watch that, and hopefully that disease doesn't spread too far. We did implement the late Mighton buck hunt. This is the first year for that in that Mighton area. That hunt just ended a couple weeks ago. And so we haven't received any chronic wasting disease results on that hunt yet, but it's targeting some of the older bucks that are more likely to be carrying chronic wasting disease and more likely to spread that disease. So we'll see what comes in from those harvested animals, but we may have a few more positive results. Black rosy finch is kind of an interesting project. Brian Maxwell's here, but he's been tagging black rosy finches. He's captured 398 over the previous years. Black rosy finches are actually one of the bird species in North America we know the least about. Typically they nest in the high alpine habitats, and we do have black rosy finches that nest in the high UNAs, but we don't really know where some of these wintering birds are coming from, if they're coming from the UNAs, or if they're coming from Wyoming or other places. And so this is part of a larger project throughout the West where trying to ban some of these birds and track them. And they're actually banded with a RFID tag. It's a little tag on their leg, and we actually put up feeders that can read those. So as these birds visit these feeders, you can actually get a reading on them. And if they visit multiple feeders throughout their migration, it gives you a better idea of where they're going and where they're coming from. So kind of an interesting project. Levi Watkins, he's here tonight, here in the back. He's our new North Slope biologist, replacing Amy Vandervoort. Levi's a native of Vernal. He graduated from BYU about 4 years ago. He's finishing up his master's degree right now, but again, he's a native of Vernal, but he's been working down for the division in the Loa area for the last 3 years. So he's excited, I think, to be home, and we're excited to have him here in the region. So we welcome him here to work with us. So in aquatics, we've got a few things going on right now. We actually have a survey going on right now where we're surveying anglers about our Diamond Mountain reservoirs. We've had about 70 people respond, but we're just kind of looking what people's opinions are and how we can manage those different reservoirs given the limited amount of water that we've had in these drought years, and what people might want to see in terms of which lakes have water or which lakes have different management strategies. So if you're interested, Trina Hendrick, our aquatics manager, could provide that link for that survey. Trina is also starting on a big sand wash management plan revision They had a committee meet last week, and that committee will meet and really kind of determine the future of that fishery, looking at where it's at now, what the trends have been, and what possibilities there might be going forward with that. Another really big project right now is lake trout tagging at Flaming Gorge. The goal is to tag 1,000 lake trout prior to the krill survey. It'll be coming up in January. And the reason for tagging these fish is it gives you, as people catch them and report them, it gives you a way to estimate the population through a mark recapture technique. And so it's be interesting for anglers. These tags all have Wyoming numbers on them, so they can be reported Wyoming, but some of the tags are worth like a $50 cash reward. So it's probably gives them an incentive for anglers to be able to report those and turn those in. So anyhow, it's going to be a pretty interesting study to really get a better idea of what's going on with lake trout populations and numbers in Flaming Gorge. Habitat is always busy, but some of the habitat project work starting to wrap up a little bit for this season with the winter coming on. There was just a 700-acre mastication project on August Ridge in the Book Cliffs just completed, trying to open up some of these pinyon juniper areas to get some more forage growing for deer and elk and other species out there. In addition, an additional 10,000 acres were recently aerially seeded on the Dollar Ridge and Richard Mountain burn scars to help stabilize those areas, help stabilize the watersheds, but also increase desirable forage for wildlife on those. And then the Watershed Restoration Initiative proposal period is coming up in the first week of January, so our biologists are spending a lot of time right now working with partners to put together proposals for the upcoming year. This will be work that would start beginning July of 2023. So outreach still has a lot going on, so I'll go down through the list of a few events, and this is a pretty good list because this RAC won't be meeting until April, but we'll try to cover a few things up for the next couple of months. The Christmas bird count, this is a national initiative. Local bird count will be held at ORAID National Wildlife Refuge on December 17th from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Contact Tanya Kiefer if you're interested in participating on that. It's a fun event for birders to be able to participate on. There's going to be an ice fishing basics seminar at Sportsman's Warehouse. I missed the date on that. January 13th. So there's an Eventbrite registration. It's a free registration to participate in that clinic, but it'll be a good opportunity for people to learn some of the basics of ice fishing. The following day, the disabled outdoorsmen are hosting a ice fishing event at Steinecker Reservoir. That'll be 8 a.m. to noon, and the Disabled Outdoorsman website will have more information on that event. January 21st is the 2023 Steinecker Youth Ice Bowl from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Again, the registration for that is on Eventbrite. The Burbot Bash at Flaming Gorge, that annual event will be January 27th through the 29th this year. Usually attracts well over 1,000 anglers for that event. The Ice Addiction Tournament, that's another big popular tournament that goes on each year. That'll be February 4th at Steinecker Reservoir. Another watchable wildlife event that we'll be hosting is the Bald Eagle Viewing Day. That's February 18th at Ori National Wildlife Refuge. And then finally in March, we'll have our annual Mountain Goat Viewing Day at Upper Stillwater Dam in Rock Creek, but we don't have the date settled on that yet. So more information to come on that. It'll be kind of depending on some of the conditions, snow conditions, and different things this year. So anyhow, that's kind of what's going on right now with wildlife resources here in the Northeast region. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Miles. We'll move on to item number 5, but prior to doing that, I'll just discuss the procedure for those of you that are here from the public. If you're not familiar with it, the presentations were online, so we will not have a full presentation by the division, but we will have a brief summary, and the division personnel that's over the topic will be there to discuss it. And there will be a brief presentation. There'll be questions from the RAC members. And then there's opportunity, if something's not clear, to have questions from the public. Then we'll move on to comments from the RAC, and we'll review the online comments. And if you want to comment and state your position on either any of these items, you need to fill out the little card. We'll call you by name. We'll try to keep comments around 3 minutes each. And so if you do want to speak, please fill out a little card and just give it to Tanya and she'll bring it up to us. So with that, we'll roll into number 5, which is the Utah Prairie Dog Conservation Strategy. Kim Hersey is online with us today. And so Kim, if you wouldn't mind, just give a overview of the topic to start us off.
Actually, go ahead,
yeah.
Barbara.
I was just going to say, Kim is online, but I'm going to be answering questions today. My name is Barbara Sugarman. I'm the Utah Prairie Dog Recovery Biologist. I apologize. I thought we'd emailed ahead of time, but.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to just give us a brief overview of
Yeah.
the suggestion?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the Utah Prairie Dog Conservation Strategy and associated rule is basically the plan that would be implemented if and when delisting occurs. So the vote today is not on delisting. It's just on the plan that would be implemented in associated rule when delisting occurs.
Thank you. Could you just discuss the process of delisting? It starts with a recommendation from the division, and then what is the general process after that?
Yeah, so it's a long process. It'll start with the Wildlife Board in January, and then from there go back to our signatories / partners for the memorandum of agreement, which will probably take a couple of months. And then from there, the division will make a formal request with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which will most likely take a couple of years. And then they'll do a draft delisting, and that takes about a year or so through the Federal Register. So it's not a short process.
Thank you. RAC members, do you have questions? I hear none. Members of the public are here for the prairie dog topic? Okay. Was there any online comments, Miles?
Just one person that strongly agreed with the proposal, so just one person responded.
Thank you. There were no comments from the audience, no comment cards, I don't believe, for this topic. Okay. So RAC members, what's your thoughts on this? Rebecca, you are our non-consumptive member, and so you start this off. Tell us what you think.
I enjoyed the presentation. It was really good. And I think the one question I actually do have is, because it's such a long process, will you go back and edit the management plan based on like what happens through the process?
That's a really good question. So built into the conservation strategy is an adaptive management approach. So based on where the population currently is, it has different tiers. So it's kind of built in already into the conservation strategy to adapt based on where the population is in a couple of years when delisting would actually go through.
I had a question for you. Just in general, when you relocate these urban tame prairie dogs out into the wild, do you have pretty good success with that, or what kind of success do you have with that?
Translocation success has definitely been varied. There's some areas like the Ponsagon has had pretty good translocation success. Some areas in the West Desert have and have not. Same with the Awaba. And those are the different recovery units. I apologize for not explaining it, but it was in the presentation. So in general, I would say it varies with conditions. It's successful at improving the distribution and number of colonies, but if you look on the ground, the percent that actually survive is fairly low. It's thought to be around 10%.
Thank you. Any other comments from the RAC?
I'd just make the comment that this is a great thing, right? That we're moving towards delisting, and great work. Thank you.
Okay, if everyone's ready, this is I believe it's an action item, isn't it? This is an item where we need to have a motion, so I would entertain a motion on this topic of Utah Prairie Dog Conservation Strategy.
I would make the motion that we accept the Utah Prairie Dog Conservation Strategy as presented.
Thank you. Motion by Mallory. Do we have a second?
Second. Sorry, you can second it.
You're good.
Guess I better turn the mic on though. So yeah, I'll second it.
Second by Bob. And we'll do a raise of hands here local, and then I believe Joe's still online. So all in favor? Joe?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. And we'll now move to the Utah Black Bear Management Plan Rule Amendments. Darren DeBloois is here to present us overview and then be available for questions.
Yeah, so the Black Bear Plan expires next year, so in 2023. So we convened a committee this summer, well, actually fall, to beginning late summer, to review that plan. And that committee came up with 3 sort of areas of change. One was the plan itself. Secondarily, we made a few tweaks in rule, which you should have seen in the packet. And then we also shifted our hunt strategies around. Some of the marching orders we got from the director when we started the committee was, one, to try to simplify both the management process and also just hunting structure in general. We felt like it was kind of burdensome. It was difficult for a biologist to remember year to year exactly what we were doing. It was pretty complicated. So we definitely shot for that. Some other things we discussed was overlap between bait and hounds. We've been talking about this for quite a while, but it makes it really difficult for our enforcement officers, where it's illegal to chase off of a bait, to kind of weed that out in the field. And so the group in the hunt strategy realignment did that. And we also looked at archery hunting in the fall and hounds. So that's probably it in a nutshell. The only other things I wanted to add is on the list of participants in the committee, Kirk Player on the presentation when I presented it was listed as representing backcountry hunters and anglers. And that was just a miscommunication. But when he got onto the RAC, that's kind of that was where he was coming from, but that he's no longer affiliated with them. So Kirk represented sportsmen on the RAC, just to make sure everybody's clear, and we're all on the same page. The other one is one that actually Dallin just noticed, and for the Book Cliffs, Bitter Creek South spot and stock season in the fall, the beginning date in the presentation was August 15th. That should be the 19th. I think that was just fat fingers on the keyboard that probably did that, but we don't want to have any overlap between spot and stock hunting and hound hunting. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions folks have.
Go ahead, RAC members.
Yeah, I got one question.
Sure.
So part of the proposal would be for baiting. They still get a COR, but
Right.
then it's not reviewed by the Division of Wildlife where the location is. And so the question I have is, in this region anyway, and I don't know if it did it anywhere else in this other regions of the state, but the Forest Service and the Division of Wildlife got together and produced a map on where areas where baiting would be allowed,
Right.
which is mostly anywhere on the forest. There's just some areas that there's been some conflict or like it's close to dispersed sites we try to avoid. So is that map, are they going to, are the guys who draw a permit, are they going to have that map available to them? Or is it going to be sent to them, or how's that going
Yes.
to work?
So last year we made the online registration available, so people can register their bait stations online. What we're changing, Bob, is that we're not going to have a biologist look at every single bait station and say thumbs up, thumbs down. We are going to say these are the regulations. They'll still need to register online, so we'll have a map of every single bait station that's registered, and we'll share that with the land management agencies so you're aware where they are. There's also an overlay of no-go zones, and that was generated based on our restrictions from distance from water, distance from roads, distance from campgrounds, et cetera. So they can see when they plunk their registration or their bait station down on the map, they'll have red areas that are screened. It's actually a little bit, it buffers for water even in drainages where there may not have been water for years. So that doesn't mean that a person couldn't put a bait station there, but on the map, it'll look like it's no-go. And if they want to go in the field and make an argument that there's no water here, I'm good, then that's up to them. But I think the sentiment in the committee was, we don't hold any other hunters' hands. These are the rules. You need to register. So law will have a map, and then they're going to follow up. And they do already. They already go and check bait stations to make sure they're legal and they're where the people say they are, et cetera. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I just bring it up because there are some, it's like in the regs, I think it's like you said, a half mile for campground away from water, but there are dispersed sites that are popular.
Right.
And baiting bears towards those dispersed sites or near it. That's that map we been using with the Division of Wildlife we helped develop, was to help try to avoid some of those dispersed sites that were popular.
Right.
So that we're not attracting bears, because we don't want to have another incident like the one in Timpanookie and American Fork Canyon a few years back. And that was a dispersed site. And so anyway, if those areas, if those areas are on a map, that would be great if that map could be included.
The only thing I'd say is that in our regulations, the only restrictions are those distances. We talked about this a little bit last night. So right now BLM, they require the hunters come in and say, I want a bait station here, and they can say yes, or they can give permission or not. And so we struggle with that with forest. And historically, we've had a kind of an agreement with the forest that, our regulations were good enough. And I think what you're talking about is maybe some additional sites that fall outside of those restrictions in the rule. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
It'd be additional dispersed sites.
So I'll talk to our Assistant Attorney General about that. What we said last night is that we could add something to the rule about land management agencies having some additional, being able to restrict additional areas. That'd probably be easier than having everybody that wants a bait station come into your office and get a permission slip. But I'd need to check with the attorneys, but it sounds to me like you'd like to include those areas. And currently they are included in the layer that the Northeastern region provided us. So I'll check on that. I definitely support having, you're the land managers. And so if you've got some concerns, I think we ought to be able to say no. And it's essentially the forest saying this is an activity that you can't do here. So rather than have them come to your office, if there's a way to block those out, I think that'd be good.
All right. Yeah. Thanks. I guess apologize. That was a comment mixed with the question.
No,
So
you're good.
Any other questions from the RAC?
I was just thinking about, that map-based way that they're able to register their bait location. Has there been any discussion about just having them tag a photo of their bait set up? Everyone has phones now, seems like.
Yeah.
It'd be pretty easy to have them
We
take a
we
photo.
haven't talked about it. I know, for the coyote stuff, we do that. So it's based on the same Esri base, so that's a possibility, sure. But we hadn't really thought about it. But that'd be one way that a law could look at a picture and see what it looks like. But they'll also have a GPS coordinate.
I don't know if this is the right time to ask it, but was there, and maybe it was in here, I just didn't see it. Was there a discussion about reducing the price for like harvest objective tags? Is this the right? section
Yeah,
to
no,
ask
that's
it?
a good question. So the fee schedules has to go through the legislature. So we submit a recommended fee schedule. The committee recommended that we lower the price of a spot and stock tag. So we'll definitely do that the next time we take permits through that process. But for now, it's going to have to remain where it is.
Is the lion, that, when the wildlife board recommended
I
that price, what happened to the lions?
Brett, I think that went through with this round, I think. And Lindy's not on, but Lindy could correct me. But my understanding was that what we did with all those other fees when they brought up the reduction of lion tag, that was part of a package that was going to move to the legislature this session. So I guess it hasn't happened yet, but it's in the pipeline. This kind of got behind that process, so it'd have to wait for the next round. But it's definitely something we plan to do.
Are there questions from the public? Please state your name.
My name is Jason Binder. I have a couple of questions. So in removing the safety triggers that we had to protect amount of harvest on units, what was the main purpose of that other than making it easier for biologists?
You mean the number of units that can be in certain categories?
Yes.
So we've been doing it this way for a little while, since the last bear plan. We haven't seen a whole lot of, only a handful of people have said, I'd like to change. But in order to do that, you have to go around the state and say, hey, will you give up yours? Because I need this. And we didn't feel like there was a huge demand, so there wasn't a lot of danger that we'd put a bunch of units into the liberal harvest strategy. But we also felt like district biologists know their units the best and know the people that are there. They ought to be able to make a decision about the best management strategies for the unit. So that's really at the base of it, Jason.
Okay. I briefly watched through your presentation, but I didn't see the actual percentage of female harvest.
Yeah, I guess I didn't put that in there. I do have one here. Let me look. Where did I put that? It's been going up. I'm just trying to find the graph. So, old man eyes. The last couple of years, it's actually statewide has creeped above 40. And what we do statewide in the plan is manage for that mid management strategy. So when you put everything together, statewide, we ought to be in that sort of moderate zone. And so, we're 2 years into the 3-year recommendation cycle. So this is stuff we'll be looking at when we come back next year and recommend permit changes. But it has been slowly ticking up over the last 5 years or so. It bounced around, but the trend is up.
Okay, my next question would be, would that create a trigger that we're starting to do more damage to our bear population with the sow harvest being?
Yeah, so it'll depend on, it'll be unit by unit, depending on what the harvest or what the management strategy is. But yeah, if they're getting above those triggers, then it would, yeah, we'd see I suspect on some units, you'll see a reduction in bear permits the next time around.
Okay, so there's no reduction in tags currently right now?
No, we do 3 years at a time.
Okay.
And we're still doing that like
Right.
the old plan.
Thank you.
Thank you. What was online comments like on this one, Miles?
Yeah, for the black bear plan, we had one person that somewhat agreed and one person that was neutral. So not a lot of feedback on this.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll maybe start off the comment period. Since I've been here for about 6 years, we've been dealing with the conflicts, and seems like we're kind of getting them, the overlaps and the field conflicts related to mostly to hounds and bear hunting. We've pretty well got them so they're not overlapping, don't we, Darren?
Yeah, this current proposal would have 1 day of overlap spring on Memorial Day, that Monday. And it really isn't an overlap. The hound hunters would be finishing up on Memorial Day weekend that Monday, and bait hunters could begin placing baits on that Monday. And so there'll be ships in the night, kind of, doing one transitioning, but we felt like 1 day was not a big deal. And it gives them Memorial Day, the bait hunters, to get out on that weekend and start getting set up. So other than that, we've eliminated, all the other overlaps. And that was another thing the director asked the committee to do, is to not have any kind of overlaps between bait and hound hunting.
For some of the RAC members that maybe weren't around, we had significant conflicts down on the LaSalle's, a little less or so in the Book Cliffs, but still large numbers. And I think Darren's worked hard, and I think you've done a good job.
Yeah, the committee did a
dodging
good
all
job of, it was, we had 5 meetings, each was 3 hours, and we spent a significant amount of time trying to move pieces around the board on, when you start looking at season, especially in the fall, trying to get everything in a place where it could go. That was a feat, and the committee did a great job.
And one other issue I'd just like to bring up, because I've had several people talk to me this week, but the media had resurrected the video from a few years ago with the bear issue we had down south with the dog training.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want the RAC to know and the public know we did change the rules significantly, hopefully, so that won't happen in the future.
That's right.
Based on that one incident. So it wasn't quite portrayed that way this week.
I think that certainly not the broadcast, but I don't think even in the article it mentioned that we'd already made some changes, and that, I appreciate
So
that.
we're 2 years into them changes, and you haven't seen a lot of repeated problems.
The feedback we're getting from down there is that so the things we did is we severely restricted non-resident pursuit permits available on the list, the LaSalle's of San Juan and the Book Cliffs. And we also put a cap on hound pack size at 16. And there was one more that I can't remember right now. Anyway, the feedback we got at the Southeastern Region RAC last night from our law enforcement they're down there is that, and the forest, felt like they're seeing an improvement. They're having less conflicts, and that seems to have really addressed a lot of their concerns. So it seems to be working, at least trending in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. We have one comment from Jason Binder.
My name's Jason Binder. It's been a while since I've been to these RAC meetings. I used to go to them all the time, so I'm getting a little rusty. It shows me a lot of concern about removing the parameters that we had in the previous management plan, because when we worked on that plan, it was able to keep our harvest strategy well intact. And now removing them, I think we're going to run into a bigger issue. Like Darren just mentioned, we're already starting to see higher sow harvest. I hunt pretty much all over the whole state. I've definitely noticed that the bear population around the state is drastically declining. That's part of the reason why I'm here tonight. So the percentage of sow harvest is really starting to get a major toll on our bear population. And I would also like to see a little more in-depth information on how successful the percentage of spot and stock and the bait hunts actually are and how they affect our bear population. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Could you address that spot?
Yeah, so it's low, but it's about 20%. And we've only really had we've had 2 seasons now of spot and stock. And most of that's on those high density units. So like the LaSalle had a cap of 12 and they harvested 10 bears on spot and stock. San Juan was 12 too, they took 6. Everywhere else, fewer bears, much less success. So, and that stands to reason. It's something so that all goes into the mix. So at the end of the year, at the end of our cycle, if they're taking a lot of sows, we'd expect spot and stock to take more sows just because it's much harder and you're going to probably take the first bear you see. We'll make adjustments based on the plan. So I don't know if everybody knows what Jason's referring to, but in this recommendation, in the past, was it 25% on each end? Jason, I think it was.
I think so.
So you'd add up, you could only ever have 25% either in the liberal, which is a strategy to decrease bear densities, or in the, what do we call it, light. And so what we're saying is that we'd like to lift that and let the biologists for each unit, taking into account the surrounding units and what his bear population is doing to make a decision. They don't have to bargain with another region to try to get, a unit in. So just background, just so maybe we're all on the same page on what Jason's talking about.
On the 12, you were saying you had a limit of harvest in the spot and stock. So has it got its own harvest objective, the spot and stock?
Yeah. So when we did permits last time, we made spot stock permits over the counter, and we put quotas on those seasons. And so that's how we regulate the number of bears that'll be taken. So anybody that wants to go get a permit can, but once they hit the quota, it closes. And then the quota would be adjusted depending on where we are depending on the harvest strategy and the number of sows and the number of older aged males in the harvest. So we'd make quota changes based on that.
You kind of answered one of the questions I was going to ask too, because just in my experience too, haven't hunted bears a lot and haven't done it ever with hounds, but definitely difficult to tell it sometimes. And I would guess that spot and stock's going to bump your sow harvest numbers up.
Yeah.
Does that indicate, that's probably still just taken into account on a unit by unit basis, right? Of what that means.
I think as long as the success rates are low, it all gets put in the mix, but it's probably less of a concern but obviously we'll keep an eye on that. And if we need to reduce quotas to reduce the number of females being taken on that hunt, we certainly can do that. But again, it's really these high bear density units that are seeing the most success. Most other units are not seeing a lot of harvest from spot and stock hunters. And people may get better at it. Washington, Oregon, that's the only kind of bear hunting you can do, and they have a lot more bears than we do. But people kind of learn. So, and we'll also have to see, what we're proposing tonight is to expand that season and move it back into the archery season a little bit, and we'll have to see what that does too.
So with these trends you're seeing and kind of, I can hear what you're saying, you're expecting probably to have to make some adjustments.
Right.
We don't really have the ability to make you're not talking about permit numbers tonight in any way,
no.
Are you?
No.
So I mean,
we the last time we did permit numbers, that board approved that for 3 years. And so I think it'll be next December, we'll be coming back with permit numbers. And that'll all be, we'll look at the last 3 years and we'll have 3 years of spot and stock and we'll have a better idea where we are there. But that's when the biologists will be making adjustments to permit numbers. So tonight we're just talking about the plan and changing some things up moving forward.
And where the biologists would have control over that, would they have, is that an annual thing or are they still tied to the 3-year also?
Yeah, it's 3 years. They're watching the numbers. We make the harvest data available and et cetera. But with bears, you don't need to make adjustments every year. You really want to take it in chunks. But we also need to be prepared that if we see a lot of females showing up in the harvest to, make some significant cuts, because bears can, unlike lions, you can really hit them. If you hit them too hard, it can really take a while to recover because they don't reproduce as fast as lions do.
Thank you. Anybody, any comments on the RAC?
Yeah, just one other one, Darren. So to follow up on that, so from what I'm hearing then is that the parameters we're talking about, that's the light, I think it's the light, moderate, and heavy. That's
Yeah.
not necessarily in the plan. However, that can be taken into account when biologists are looking at their unit.
Yeah, so
When they're-
those categories remain. What we're proposing to change is that is limiting those two ends to a certain number of units. And
Okay.
if a biologist feels like he could grow, he could slip it into light and he wouldn't have to go to some other region and say, hey, can you put yours in moderate because I want to go, and vice versa on the other end. If they've got issues and they feel like they've got to reduce bear numbers, they wouldn't have to go bargain with a biologist in the northern region from the south or whatever to do that. And the track record is that's not going to happen very often, but it has happened a couple times over the life of this plan, where a biologist feels like he needs to implement a management strategy, but that kind of ties their hands, and they just don't do it because it's too hard to negotiate, I guess. But we felt like it wouldn't be a free for all, so this would be a good way to go. And my personal philosophy is let's let our district biologists make those decisions whenever possible.
Okay, if there's no further questions or comments from the RAC, where do we want to go on this one? We can prove it as presented. We could put some recommendations with it. If you're concerned about what you've been hearing, we can't recommend permit changes, but we can sure recommend, well, whatever you're thinking.
I'd make the motion that we'd go ahead and recommend that we approve the management plan. I guess is how we need to word that as the division is set forth.
Okay, we have a motion to approve it as presented. Are there any seconds, or does anybody have any further discussion on that before we move with that?
I'd second him.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Joe?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. All right, you're one of three, Darren.
Yeah, so that was the hard one. So yeah, the next one is Furbearer, and we are only proposing 2 real changes. Everything else in this proposal is just date changes to reflect the calendar. We are proposing a couple of drainages in southern Utah be close to beaver take, and those are areas where we're doing habitat restoration projects with the forest, and we want to try to establish. My understanding is that they're burn areas, or at least downstream from burn areas. If we can get some beavers in there, building dams, that would be helpful. So that's why that's in there. But that's really the only change from what we looked at last time around.
How do you just put that in the Furbearer proclamation?
Yeah,
That
yeah, so
drainage is off limits?
There's a little box in there that has closed areas. So we'll add those in the guidebook.
Thank you. Questions from the RAC? And did we have any questions from the public? Any online comments, Miles?
Just one comment that strongly agreed with the proposal, but they didn't leave any specific comment.
Thanks. Way back when, we used to regulate the number of Bobcat permits, something like 2,500. And there was competition for the permits. And I don't remember if there was a per person cap or exactly how it was done.
It varies depending on what the population's doing, yeah.
And the recommendation, probably been 5 years ago now, was to remove the cap and just move it to six tags per individual. And it really hasn't changed the harvest a whole lot, has it?
It seems like that's right, Brett. The main driver of Bobcat harvest is pelt price. And so it just tracks. Pelt price goes up, harvest goes up. And there's a lag. People get, oh, wow, this is great. Pelt price drop. And some people figure out it's too hard and they kind of back off. But that's more than any other biological factor. It seems like that's what drives it. We are initiating a study with USU to try and get some monitoring in place on bobcats that we could add to the plan, but it's early days on that. We're just starting that.
Maybe more of a question again. Is it similar to the other fur bearers in terms of use? Is it just ebb and flow with the market?
Yeah, really, it seems like pelt price for all those species drives it.
Okay, with that, I'll call for a motion if we're ready. Oh, did we have one?
You have public comment? No,
Sorry. Was there anybody from the public that wanted to comment? Okay. If we're done discussing it, then I would open it up for a motion.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion to.
Mr. Chairman, I'd go ahead and make the motion that we approve the Furbearer and Bobcat season dates and closures as recommended by the division.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Joe?
Yes.
Thank you. That's the last action item. Now we'll move to number 8 for a Cougar update from Darren, which is our final item.
Yeah, so Cougar are on a 3-year cycle as well. And so I just wanted to present some data and kind of update the RACs on what we're looking at. But yeah, it's not an action item. But if anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer.
On the graphs in your presentation, I don't know if you have them. Do you have that?
I don't think I sent that one. I will pull it up on my laptop, and then if we need to, we can put it up. What was your question? Or do you need to see the graph?
The last
The harvest?
It seemed.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we're in a drought cycle, and the harvest is went up. Is that an indication of a robust population, or what do you see there?
So what happened last year is we saw a big drop in harvest, and we saw a similar drop back in the late 90s. The last time we probably saw a peak in cougar populations. I think there's a couple things. One is that the legislature passed passed legislation that said if our deer populations were below objective, we needed to reduce predators. And so we have this new predator management strategy where a lot of units in the state went to unlimited year-round cougar season. But I also, like I said, we saw a similar trend in the past, and I think based on that and some of our population modeling, oh, hey. Pull it up. If I can plug it into the right. I'll make that bigger. Yeah, so that you see that drop. So this, the blue line, just so everybody's on the same page, that's sport harvest. So that's people with permits out hunting. And the orange line is total mortality that we have reported to us. So that would include wildlife services take, roadkill if we happen to get roadkill, or division removal if we have to remove an animal. So that's the difference between the two. But the period I'm talking about was back in '96. We saw a similar drop in harvest. We did a plan. I think the first cougar plan was '99, and you start to see it start kicking back up a little bit after that. We made some adjustments, and then the most recent plan I think was adopted in some form in 2015. But yeah, you see that mostly I think what's going on here is this: as we saw growing mule deer populations in the mid 2010s. Mountain lion numbers followed, with increased prey. Those numbers grew. And we might be, in addition to our harvest strategies in 2021, we may have seen a real reduction in cougar densities across the state. So there's less available. And then I don't know if our houndsmen want to talk about conditions. I don't know that last year was a difficult year to hunt. I suspect it depends on where you hunted, but it seems like we had good conditions. So I don't know that that's driving it.
So if that's a real decrease and that trend continues with the current rule, it's still based on the deer herd objective, correct?
For management plans. So this next season will be the third year of the 3-year cycle for mountain lions. We're out ahead. So the things we're talking about, the season dates right now, we're into 23. So we'll be we need to look at a couple things. One is just the regular management plan parameters. And if those are outside of the plan, then we'll make adjustments accordingly. The other thing we need to discuss this summer and look at is what's been the effect of these predator management plans. What are we seeing in our mule deer herds? You heard Miles talk about, we're seeing healthy, heavy fawns, and BYU's also doing a lot of work looking at predator-prey relationships, and they're starting to really hone in on what the tipping point is, where if you've got a certain percentage of adult does being killed by lions, that can really suppress a deer population. But below that, it's probably not the main factor. And so we'll have some of those numbers to apply to. And it really depends on the unit. It looks like South Manti, we had for several years, adult doe survival was, I think, in the 80s, high 70s, low 80s, which is really quite low. But we had adult deer in really good condition. So it wasn't a habitat issue. They were getting plenty to eat. But lion take on those collared does was really high. When we implemented harvest or a predator management plan on that unit, started taking more lions, those survival rates went right back up there in the 90s now, and we saw a drop in cougar take. So, but none of these management plans aren't intended to go on forever. It's intended to get in, take care of the problem, and then go back to the plan and manage moving forward according to the plan, as long as our deer herds are doing all right.
Thank you. Any other questions from audience or the RAC? Do we have any other business, Miles? Okay, this was informational item, so we don't need to have any motions, and appreciate your attendance. Thank you, general public, for showing up. We always like to hear what's happening out there. Have a great evening.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion by Brad, second by Rebecca. All in favor? Thank you.
Unanimous.